Welcome to Anderson Ad Break. I'm your host, Maddie. In this episode, we'll be covering our political branch of Anderson, Matters of State Strategies. They are a leading public relations firm specializing in government affairs, political campaign management, and communications. We're going to be hearing from Matt Grodsky and Ted Anderson on what it takes to run a political consulting firm, how to run successful campaigns, and everything that goes along with that. Also, we are having our first special guest on today's episode, Steve Slugocki, the former Maricopa County Democratic Chair. So we're so excited for you to watch. Let's get into it. Hi, Matt and Ted. Thank you so much for joining us today on Anderson Ad Break. How are you?
Good.
Wonderful. How are you?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I'm doing very well. You're here with us today because you work for Matters of State Strategies, which is the political arm of our parent company, Anderson Advertising. And so I wanted to do this podcast episode with you because I actually used to work at Matters of State Strategies. And I really loved working in the political field and getting like a little feel for what it's like to do advertising with, political candidates and everything. So I just kind of want to get a little background of Ted. We've interviewed you before, but could you just tell us a little bit about you and who you are and why you started Matters of State?
Sure. So I've originally from San Diego. I moved here in 1995. I was actually a Republican when I lived in California. When I moved to Arizona is where I finally found my values and became a Democrat. But I've always been super interested in politics. It just was something that was, growing up. As I've said before, I'm a total news junkie. And so just naturally kind of got into politics and supporting candidates and helping them kind of succeed and with their things. And so over the years, as I had the agency with Anderson, I helped friends that were running for office, whether it was graphic design or some media placement or things like that. In 2020, we ran a bunch of media campaigns for legislature races. And that kind of got our foot in the door. And that finally, as we'll talk later, the political world's very kind of incestuous, and it's definitely a who kind of world. And so seeing the skills that we had at Anderson and being able to offer those to political campaigns, and then actually as Arizona has moved into being a swing state, there's a lot more attention on the state, meaning a lot more money coming into the state, and that just was a big opportunity that I saw. And so that's how we started Matters of State right after 2020. I was lucky to hire Matt who was working for the state party, and we were off and running.
Yeah. No, like you said, it is a very, close-knit space, especially in local politics in Arizona. That's actually how I met you.
That is.
You were my former boss at the state party, and you recruited me over here at Matters of State because, we worked so well together and we had a lot of experience. So, Matt, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into politics and then,
Sure.
how eventually you got over to Matters of State?
Totally. So I was born and raised here in Phoenix, Arizona, but I was that weird kid growing up who would hurry home to watch The West Wing when I was 7 years old.
That's normal.
It's super normal. Totally cool. So I was always interested in politics, always had, an interest in current events, foreign affairs, but was primarily interested in film. So I had gone to film school. Full intent was to, go to Hollywood and do that whole thing. But then the 2016 election happened.
Right.
And I was like, oh my goodness, need to use my powers for good. So kind of made a switch to get into the public affairs, government affairs side of things. Worked at several firms out here in Phoenix, and then ultimately wound up at the Arizona Democratic Party in 2019. That is where I met you and hired you. Lots of good memories there because we had the pandemic.
Before it burned down.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We'll talk about that when Steve gets here.
Yes, exactly.
But my bread and butter is political communications, helping candidates, get their message across. That's what my primary function was at the state party, was running their communications department. And then was fortunate enough to meet Ted at the tail end of that, and we got this thing started.
So after you and Ted met, was it kind of a proposition for Matt, I'm interested in starting this consulting agency? Was there a gap in the market that you saw? Was there anything, what kind of inspired you to start this when you met each other?
I mean, it was something that I saw as an opportunity for the agency. So as we're working on new business for the agency and seeing basically how I look at political campaigns is they're very similar to consumer campaigns that we're doing. It's just the product is the candidate or the idea, if it's an initiative or something that you're working on. There's still messaging strategy. There's still targeting. There's still trying to figure out, how to reach the right audience at the right time with the right message. So it's very similar to what we're doing on advertising. It just happens to be for a candidate for running for office. I always saw, and like I said, I saw the opportunity and knew I was going to start Matters of State. It wasn't like we had this idea. So I just was looking for the right partner. I knew I needed to hire somebody that was already kind of inside the door. And so I connected with Matt.
Right.
So a good friend of mine referred me to him, and we hit it off, and it just worked out really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the time, I was looking for finding an established, agency, someone who was respected in the field, was, referred to Ted, which was awesome. Hit it off. So, just wanted to kind of get a democratic and independent, firm out there that could help with the new swing state status that the state was experiencing, because for a very long time, it's been more conservative. A lot of firms popped up there to fit that need. But since the transition that kind of started in, I'd say 2018, obviously metastasized in 2020, there was definitely an opportunity for something like Matters of State to take shape.
There's definitely firms out there. Like, while we lean Democrat, we lean blue. Yeah. We've actually done work for Republican candidates. We helped Stephen Richer in his last primary. Yeah. So as long as, in our mind, it's like, as long as they're sane, and they're not crazies, like no matter which side of the aisle, we're willing to work with them. And there's plenty of really good firms out there and consultants that are working
absolutely
in Arizona. And I think there's on the left side of things, there's not as many as there are on the right side. And I think that just like shows kind of where the state has been moving.
Right.
So yeah, I think there definitely was an opportunity that I thought we could fill and help round out things, and that's where we are.
Yeah. Well, your discernment and, helping both sides of the aisle at times, that kind of goes into the mission and the values of Matters of State strategy. So could you kind of talk about that? Like, what's the goal? What's the mission? What's your guys' values for this company? And where do you want to see it go?
I think it's primarily trying to help elect candidates with integrity, causes that we think help better society. We'll work with not just political candidates, we'll work with nonprofits, sometimes, more corporate entities, cities and towns. So kind of to Ted's point, as long as you're sane and you're not, out to wreck the country or our institutions, we do want to work with you. The country is stronger. Our local politics are stronger when there's ideas from both sides and everybody's operating in good faith. So just trying to move us forward, not backward, is kind of the ethos. And then, the rest is filled by our tactics and whatever the current project is.
Yeah, I think our mission, I think just as people, kind of our values are very much of, we want Arizona. I've said this before. I think I'm a huge fan of Arizona. I think Arizona is an amazing state to live and do business in, and I think wanting it to be the best it can be. And I think there's sometimes factions within Arizona on the crazy side of things that aren't really looking towards that. They're not looking towards how to make Arizona even better. It's more just trying to protect their ideas. And I think for us, if we can help a candidate win that is more reasonable, more really grounded in trying to do the right thing for the state, not just for their particular party or faction, then that's, I think, a really good thing for us to be striving for. And
I think something you could touch on too, maybe, is the impact that electing crazies have on the business community. I mean, obviously working in advertising.
I say this a lot, and I think it's shocking to me to see the support on the right now from the business community, because I think as a businessman and someone who's run businesses for 3 decades, it's businesses want stability. They want predictability. They want to be able to when you're putting your forecasts out, and you want to kind of understand what the conditions are going to be. And so it's wild to me to see support for candidates that are just like all over the board and doing things that are not predictable, and you have no idea what to expect. And it's even like looking at the legislature this session, because they didn't get their way because they have a 1-seat majority. The ballot this election in 5 weeks is gonna be 2 pages long, because there's 14 propositions that were put on there by the legislature, not by the citizens, by the legislature, because they couldn't get the governor to sign it. And so they're like, we're just going to put it in front. And those same legislatures passed laws to make it more difficult for citizens to put propositions on. So you have propositions like the abortion rights proposition that's on, it had to get 700,000 signatures. They made it way more difficult for citizens to put propositions on the ballot, but the legislature themselves, these 17 people, passed a law to make it easier for them themselves to put things on.
Mm-hmm.
It's so frustrating to hear about that. But, I think going back, one of the big things of why I wanted to work with Matters of State and what I saw in Matt and, eventually when I met you, Ted, was, that you value like the person and you value our state and our election system and, protecting democracy over, a partisan, whatever you register for. And I think that's a value that I really align with as well, because Arizona is a purple state and we are, we do have both sides. And I think if we can work together, then we could go really, really far. And like you said, there's so much potential opportunity for the business community and just other communities in general. So it's disappointing to see that our political state right now is trying to make it more difficult for citizens to exercise their right to vote, exercise their right to, elect who they want. But so do you have any particular clients that you've worked with at Matters of State Strategies that you want to highlight that, have done a great job at, enforcing that kind of value?
Well, I mean, I think the race that I'll say put us on the map and we're incredibly proud of, and Maddie, you worked on this, was, Adrian Fontes is for Secretary of State, and running against, again, one of the crazies, Mark Fincham, who was, an election denier, still to this day is,
and he's running again,
is litigating and running again. And it's like, and so it's, to be behind a candidate like Adrian Fontes, who was, really a beacon of hope for the state, to be able to say, he's doing the right thing. He's totally fighting against, the crazies, and, to serve Arizona in a way that brings, integrity to the office and, again, stability and reliability.
On the stability front, I mean, his big message was the golden thread, and elections are the golden thread that holds society together. It's predictability. It's how businesses plan. It's how municipalities plan. And that was a big component of his message that I think resonated, not just with Democrats, but with independents, moderate Republicans. And that's why he had the second highest win margin in the state, second to Senator Kelly. So, those values are important, and that's the type of leadership that you need in these candidates.
Yeah, that's a pretty big win. Working for someone like that, he was an amazing candidate to work for. He is one of the smartest people I've ever met. The way that he can, talk to people through knowledge, and knowledge is power, I think. The more he knows so much about the integral, functions and process of how our elections work. So I think that was a really amazing experience to be able to work for him and to see that kind of candidate. And thank goodness he won, because Mark Fincham would have not been a good good guy for us.
Yeah, that's an understatement for sure.
So what do you guys think sets Matters of State apart from other political firms and consulting firms?
Our sparkling personality, Ted, what do you think?
Our good looks.
Yeah.
I think one of the benefits of being somewhat new and not have been here in the political world for decades and worked on all kinds of things. As I said before, it's a very insular community of people that are working on these things. We call it the bubble. It's a lot of people that are very, very focused on the political world and like live, eat, and breathe it. So we don't have as much baggage. I think that's what I would probably say is, there's lots of people. It's a very interesting business where you're in a primary, you're fighting against your friends. You're running against friends and you're doing things to win the election, but then as soon as the general election's over or even the primary is over, you're back to being friends again. And so it's this weird dichotomy where you go from, I hate them, I'm mad at them, to I love them, they're my really good friends. You know what I mean? And so I think that the fact that we are somewhat new gives us, the ability to not have these preconceived notions of who we are, what we've done. And I think having a good track record like we have so far, shows that we can perform that way.
Yeah.
From a tactical perspective, I'd say that our speed is a major differentiator. We move lightning fast, as you know, sometimes obnoxiously fast. Our clients certainly like it. And I think that one of our other key differentiators is our communications apparatus. We like to try and dominate the narrative when we have a candidate or a cause that we're working on. That means blitzing all sorts of media and trying to, get that message out there as best we can. So I think that that's been a big strong suit that we've established the last 3.5 years. So we'll be looking to continue that. But I think those are some key points.
Yeah, I definitely think to Matt's point, the rapid response aspect of what we do. I mean, example, we're working on the Tyler Camp for Sheriff race right now. And there was a debate last week, and the opposing candidate at the very last second in the debate threw out some completely unfounded accusation towards Tyler, and Matt within minutes was already working it, and within, I'd say, a few hours already had it completely snuffed out and debunked and the whole thing. And even Tyler told me afterwards, he says, I've never seen something move so fast like that. And it was super impressive to see, because it's like, and that is one of the things Matt is incredibly talented at, is responding to things, crafting messages, figuring out angles to get that message out, and position our clients in the best way.
Yeah, I mean, you are a comms guy through and through. You know better than anyone how to write press releases, do social media, debunk things. Like, I really admire that about you. I think that's a great skill to have, especially in politics. Like you said, it's a competition at the end of the day, and I think that's a really unique business model that I think is interesting, and maybe is hard for maybe people who aren't in politics to understand that it is like you said, you do have long-term friendships with people, if you've lived in the state for a while, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's about winning the race, and you have to do compete against your friends. Okay, I guess like my final question for you guys is, what advice would you give someone looking to get into political consulting, or wanting to start their own consulting agency, but more so like advice for someone who wants to get in the business and just in general?
I mean, nothing speaks louder than experience, and and it doesn't have to be paid experience. So I think the key suggestion I would give to anyone that wants to get involved, a career in the political world, is get involved and volunteer. I mean, it's every candidate wants volunteers, needs volunteers, and next thing you know, if you're good at what you're doing and you're helpful, campaigns are notoriously budget conscious, and so if you're willing to work for free for a little bit, more than likely you'll probably work your way into a paid position where you're actually in charge of something, and then next you've got your resume already filled out of like, I worked on this campaign for this period in this role, and you also will get to meet the people. Like I keep saying, it's a very insular community, and so just being involved, going to events, working with candidates, working for in the kind of organization of the like legislative districts for each party, or the state party, or the county parties, you'll get to know the players, and those players will then help you, be a referral that you can use when you're looking for a job.
I got started taking people to coffees and meetings, just picking their brain, trying to ask them, very much that same question. If I'm interested in this, how do I get involved? I think Ted's point is spot on about, doing some stuff for free, volunteering. The learning curve and what you get out of, just spending time on a campaign is invaluable. I think the biggest thing I would pass along to someone who's thinking about getting into the industry, going back to West Wing for a second, it's not glamorous like that. It's not just, hanging out or doing the fun, big media events and the things that look exciting. It's a grind. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of hard work. It's stressful. It's hard on your family, whether you're working on a campaign directly or, you've got a consulting firm. It takes a lot. So it's not for the faint of heart, but if you're passionate about it and are committed to making a difference, find a way to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think overall the takeaway that I got as well, networking, like you both said, knowing people really helps. Inquiring, showing your passion will really also inspire people to want to hire you as well in the field. So
yeah, that advice doesn't just belong in politics either.
Right.
Just recently, friends that have kids that have like recently graduated from college, or even like my daughter's graduating next May and things like that. It's like, don't expect that your piece of paper, your diploma is going to do much for you. Like, you have to network, you have to have some kind of experience, some kind of internship, something. And even if you come out of college and don't have that, it's going to slow you down a little bit, but also look at if you're doing something, even though it may not be what you really want to do, it's adding an item to your resume. You're building your CV to a point to where like, okay, now I am actually marketable and I can do that. So, I think the people that get frustrated with job searching and things like that, sometimes like, take a chance, do something that may not be what you want to be doing. Right. And at worst case, it adds to your resume and you have experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Worst case, you learn some new soft skills or hard skills,
Yeah. Or you meet people that you may not have met otherwise. And next thing you know, that person helps you get another job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for chatting with me today. We're going to
thank
do
you.
something a little bit different on the podcast for the first time. We have Steve Slugocki coming on, and he'll be taking my place. And you guys will be able to chat a little bit more about, politics, elections, his experience, and how you guys all work together. So thank you again so much. And we'll be right back.
Thanks. All right, we're trying something a little new for the ad break. We're actually bringing in a very special guest. So this individual is someone that we've worked with very closely since we started Moss, dating back to our campaign with Adrian Fontes. So Steve Slugocki, former chair of the Maricopa County Democratic Party and one of our senior advisors.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. Ted, Matt, I do appreciate it. Happy to be here. Excited.
You're christening our guest chair.
All
so
right. Good.
congratulations.
I like to go first here, so this is awesome.
That's awesome. Well, Steve, can you give us a little background on kind of how you got started in the political world?
Sure. So I was always interested in politics. I was always just kind of like interested in learning about it. And then I was in high school during the 2000 election. And I was just kind of like trying to understand like what was happening because I really didn't get it. So that was kind of my first engagement with politics, just trying to understand what was happening in the 2000 election. And then I just kind of grew into that. I was wanting to learn more. Obviously, September 11th happened soon after that. And then the Iraq War. And I was, I had started at Paradise Valley Community College after high school. And I had to declare a major, and I was like, this is the most interesting thing to me. I really want to get involved. And so I chose political science. My parents always taught me to be involved. My mom, ironically, grew up down the street from Hillary Rodham, which is a small town in Park Ridge where I was born. But, I just wanted to get involved. So I chose political science as my major. When I started at ASU, I did a lot of political science classes. The Iraq War was going on. I was just fascinated by the battles pretty much that were going on with this. I enjoyed, as Matt probably knows, I enjoyed the fighting and debate side of all of this. And I was kind of really getting into this. I genuinely enjoyed the policy fights of everything that we were doing and trying to prove your point. So that's really what kind of got me into it. And then in 2007, I was invited to this Camp Obama in the summer of 2007. And there was like 10 of us. And it's ironic because most of them I still know today. And it was when Barack Obama had like 1% in the polls. Hillary Clinton was like a foregone conclusion. And we had started this Arizona for Obama thing. And it was great. And it just kind of grew and grew and grew. And then I always remember I graduated in summer of 2007 from ASU. Marilyn Fox, to her credit, hired me as her campaign manager for the Board of Supervisors in 2008. I have no idea why she hired such an inexperienced person, but I worked really hard on that. And ironically, in the summer of 2008, I went to lunch with Marilyn and the chair at the time of the Maricopa County Democratic Party, Mark Manoyle, and we had lunch together. And I remember I told all my friends and my family that I had lunch with the chair of the Maricopa County Democratic Party and how incredible it was. And I couldn't believe it. And he was like, you've got to get involved. We got to get you at a higher level. We have got to get you involved with the party, not just the campaigns. So about 5 months later, I ran for treasurer of the Maricopa County Democratic Party. I actually lost my first election. And I became the secretary. I was the only male on the board in 2008. And then I was on the board of the Maricopa County Democratic Party from 2008 to 2020. So for 12 years. So at the time, I had spent a third of my life on the board of the county party in different roles. So it was kind of crazy because, like I told you, in 2008, I had lunch with Mark Manoyle, who was the chair of the county party. And I was just like so excited and proud, and I couldn't believe it. And then 7 years later, I became the chair of the Maricopa County Democratic Party.
Right? The youngest one?
Yeah. So in 2015, I was the youngest county chair in America. I was also the first chair in like 20 years to have a day job as well. A lot of people don't know, but you're not paid as the chair of the party. Well, we weren't back then.
Yeah,
But you had people bragging that they had lunch with you.
But I did. But then I've always, in my perspective, I've always tried to help the next generation, the younger people, because I remember how special I felt when I had lunch with Mark. And so that's why I made it a big deal to include the ASU Young Democrats, the Maricopa County Young Democrats, and everything that we were doing. And everybody thought I was insane at the time that I had done this. I'd put them on the board. But I was like, no, like if we want these young people to be voting, to be engaged, we've got to include them in the conversation. We've got to invite them to a seat at the table.
Right. You got to use the party system as kind of a farm system to create the next
And
generation.
then ironically,
I think it's one of the things that you notice when you're around campaigns right now is the people who are running these campaigns for the most part are pretty young.
Yes.
You know, I mean, even people that are running the Harris campaign here in Arizona are predominantly in their 20s. And it's somewhat, you're taken aback a little bit by it, but it's awesome to see the energy and the passion that you have at that age. And that translates into it.
So I just knew I had to work very hard because then ironically, when I was the first vice chair in 2014 and 2015, I always laugh at this, like I was the future. I was the next generation. This guy's going to be a star. I'm so proud of him. Like he's going to be great. The moment I became chair, it was like, he's too young. Nice. He's inexperienced. Who the hell put him in charge? What is happening? How did so I had to work. The same people that were praising me months before were now my biggest critics.
Of course.
So I had to work so hard to prove myself. Even to this day, I feel like I always have got to prove myself. I've got to prove the doubters wrong. The people who said I couldn't do this. And, and by the way, like in 2016, we had some incredible victories. I'm not going to talk about Hillary.
We missed one.
That was
small one.
2016 was, by the way, the weirdest night of my life because I was upstairs. Paul Penzone had won. Adrian was looking good. And that was my job. And I was like on top of the world. And I come downstairs at the room and people are like in tears. They're crying. And I'm like,
I remember waking up the next morning and going,
that was bad.
This dread.
And I'm like, what the hell? And like, I genuinely was not allowed to celebrate their victories because of what happened with Hillary.
Yeah.
And it still didn't even really hit with me for a couple of days that Hillary had lost and how devastating that was, obviously how terrible that was for the country. But anyway, so yeah. And then I got reelected in 2016, reelected in 2018. I met my wife, Megan. She was the president of the Maricopa County Young Dems. I proposed at the 2016 DNC on the floor after Michelle Obama spoke right in front of the stage, in front of everybody. We had our beautiful boy, Cody, in 2019. That was a lot of negotiation to run again in 2018, but I did. And then obviously in 2020 with COVID and everything, and then the office being burned down, it was like, okay, it's time for me to do something else.
We should talk about that. So I first met Steve when I was the comms director at the Democratic Party. So at the time, the way it worked is the office shared a space with the county party. And you weren't in every day because you had your job that actually paid you money.
Yep.
But that's how I started working with Steve. And I worked for the state party chair, Felicia Rodolini. So there was a lot of opportunities for us to interact. But it was in July of 2020. We were all working from home, thank God, because of the pandemic. But someone decided to throw a Molotov cocktail through the door of the county side of the building.
Yep.
Turned out they were not so happy with you.
Yes, it was somebody that I had multiple previous engagements with. He had threatened me multiple times. I tried to get restraining orders, police. I was always rejected. He had sent a lot of social media threats at me and different people.
And this was a Democrat.
And this was a Democrat. He was a former PC, former activist. He had been kicked out of the local LD. We had kicked him out of the county party. It was really bad. And I mean, granted, I never thought it would go to this level, but I had removed him from everything. And he just continued to harass and threaten me and everything. And I was getting no help from the police. And so we were like, okay, let's just ignore this guy.
Right.
And so the next thing I know, like the fire happened. And that morning, the building was very old.
Yes.
And so my initial was like, okay, this was probably a wiring issue. Something happened. I thought, maybe it's Republicans. I always remember sitting on the curb with Felicia. The building is literally still smoking. Right. I'm like in tears.
I was there with you and Adrian because I think he was out jogging. He ran down there.
I had called Adrian at like 5:15 in the morning and I'm like, hey, apparently the office is on fire. I'm like, I need you to get down there. He showed up like from his morning workout. And I remember sitting on the curb with Felicia and she was like, let's not make accusations. We don't know who this was. It could have been one of our own.
Right. That was the biggest thing is that, I got the call at 3 a.m. and immediately people are like, we need to say that this was the Republicans. Yep. It was all this. And I was like, it's going to be really bad if it comes from someone from inside our own party. And it was. So we waited.
So thankful that Felicia talked me off the ledge, and I'd never imagined it was going to be one of our own. And then the next day, the police showed me the footage, and he just hit play. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, "Oh, that's Matt." I was like, "That's Matt."
Not
Edler.
me. Different
Yeah,
guy.
like literally the moment I saw it, I was like, "Oh, that's Matt." And the police were like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, 100%. I was like, I knew it was him.
So that was crisis comms at its finest.
Yeah, at its finest. At its finest.
But then we ended up working with Steve in 2022 after we had gotten the agency established on the Adrian Fontes campaign.
Yep.
So that was through the primary and through the general election.
So, well, let me get into how that worked out.
Sure.
So, like, I retired after the 2020 election to spend more time with my family. And it was like spring of 21, and Adrian was like, "Hey, like, let's talk. Like, I think I want to run for secretary. Hey, can you help get this going? You've got experience with this." And it was like, "Hey, let's have you do like one event a month." And then it was like, "Let's have you do 2 events a month." And then it was like, "Hey, let's have you do the signatures." And I remember you and I had still kept in communication. We'd went to lunch, and I told Adrian, I'm like, "Hey, you got to talk to Matt. I'm like, I think he can do some great stuff for us. Like, we work together. They've got this Matters Estate that they're working on. I think we should really talk to them about what we can do." And obviously we all got together and made it work out, and it was phenomenal. We stayed together all of 21 and 22.
Yep.
A difficult primary. We raised a lot of money. We made a lot of connections. We traveled the state. Everything that I learned as chair, I tried to help Adrian with, the thing, good and the bad. And so I think that was really helpful. Yep. Especially in the primary, more because our primary opponent was making a lot of mistakes that I think if he had an experienced local team that he wouldn't have done. But anyway, so obviously he won. He was on the cover of Time. He was on 60 Minutes. We beat Mark Fincham.
Stewart show.
He was on everything. So It was great. So it was a phenomenal job. And I'm really proud of the work we did and everything that we won that election. And
Yep. And believe it or not, he's up for re-election in like a year.
God, don't tell me that.
Horrifying.
So there's another election before then.
That's coming up.
So ballots drop here really soon for Arizona.
Yeah.
And lots of interesting races going on besides the big one at the top.
Maricopa County is the 4th largest county in America. It's the 2nd largest voting jurisdiction in America. 19 of the 30 legislative districts are in Maricopa County. Every congressional district but one touches Maricopa County. We are larger than 7 states. In population, we're larger than 27 states, which is just incredibly massive when you think about how big Maricopa County is. So this election is going to be won on the ground. Maricopa County is very diverse in geography and everything. So how you run a race in Maryvale is very different than how you do it in Gilbert. The campaigns, especially the countywide ones that go out there and they change and they tailor their message for what they're trying to do to the area, is going to be the ones that are going to win.
Yeah, and I think the localization of all those down ballot races is going to be key because for the first time in a long time, our ballot is exceptionally long thanks to the legislature, right? So
2 pages.
Unfortunately, a lot of voters tend to lose interest once they've filled out the top of their ballot. Or what they see is, the really important races, right? So if you're in that down ballot legislative or county race, you really got to make the case to your local community about why you're special, about why you need to be elected, because you can't rely on the coattails of what might be doing well.
Yeah, and I think Maricopa County and even in Arizona in general, it is still registration favors the Republicans.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And the independents.
And the independents. So you can't win as a Democrat. You can't win with just the Democratic votes. You have to appeal to the moderate,
100%
to the independents. And really, a lot of those independents are former Republicans who just got tired of kind of the craziness. And so you really are trying to talk to people who prefer the Republican and that are next to the name. And I think that one of the things that we worked on in this cycle has been, almost getting permission and trying to get, I think that's why we're seeing so many Republicans for Harris, Republicans, because you're trying to get people that really don't have a hard time voting for a D to cross the line and vote the D. And then I think the down ballot races, the risk is okay, that person held their nose and they voted for the for the Democrat.
Right, but do they go home?
But they're going to run back to home on the rest of the down ballots. And you talked about 2 pages. It's not 2 pages. It's 2 pieces of paper, front and back.
Yeah.
And so I think
It's
that
something like 89 elections.
I can't.
Total.
I don't remember. I mean, I've been voting since 1988. I can't remember ever having two pieces of.
And there was an interesting thing in the Wall Street Journal a while back that kind of speaks to what Ted was touching on. Is you've got individuals, they'll go home, after voting for maybe a Dem at the top of the ticket, right? But then there's a lot of voters that are going to vote for the abortion access amendment, that initiative. But then they're still going to vote a straight Republican ticket, even though those two things are diametrically opposed, especially if that becomes law. So I think there's an education opportunity for not just candidates, but obviously organizations that are pushing legislation to try and inform people why they need to vote a certain way, not just at the top of the ticket, but all the way down.
Sure. The abortion initiative that's on the ballot, obviously they're running a great campaign. They're doing a great job with that. But that is important to use that as a messaging tool of why it's important to elect all these down ballot and make sure you're filling out your ballot completely. I tell people all the time that, the Kamala Harris, that's the sexy one, that's the big one. But a lot of these local races are going to impact your day-to-day race so much. I have been screaming and yelling about this for I feel like all my life. The Maricopa County Board of Supervisors is the most important and powerful race that I feel like nobody knows about or talks about. We have right now a 4-1 Republican control of the board. We have multiple election deniers running. If they take the board, if the election deniers take that board and the recorder seat, we're going to have absolute chaos for the next 4 years in Maricopa County. And so I think it's important that people really take a look at these down ballot races because it's going to make a massive impact on your day-to-day life, your elections, all of those things. So I encourage people to take your time. Look, I know that ballot is a lot of work. Right. I eat, sleep, and breathe this.
Take a break, right? You don't have to fill it out all at once. Get some pizza.
But it also is important to vote immediately. If you want to help your election people out, you want to make sure that you're not waiting days for results. Get that ballot back in right away. Take a couple days, fill it out, take your time, or go vote in person. Go vote early because that is how we're going to get results quicker, and we're going to help our election workers out because we know the Republicans want chaos. They want they really want chaos on election day so that when they lose, they can challenge the results.
Yeah, I think it's one of some of the races you just mentioned, I think that are incredibly important and I think are not getting the attention that it needs based off the risk that we face if these, if the recorder race goes to Heap, who is not talking to press, not doing debates, doesn't want to show his true stripes of what he means. But this is the guy that wants to eliminate mail-in voting. He wants to convert to hand counting ballots, which will just take forever and be even more discrepancies and less accurate.
He's no different from Mark Fincham, who ran against Fontes.
Exactly. He's just not screaming it like Mark Fincham did.
And to Steve's point, if he gets in, Board of Soups goes to election deniers, and then God forbid the sheriff's office goes back to Jerry Sheridan, who's Joe Arpaio's former number 2. Then things are just going to be completely off the rails.
Well, and if you watch watching the media right now talking about the electoral college formulations and things like that, and if Arizona doesn't certify. That's 11 electoral votes that might just be hanging out there. Similar in Georgia too, as we're seeing as well in Georgia as well.
I was on the HBO show The Circus 4 years ago, and I talked about, and this is not an exaggeration, the entire election could come down to Arizona's 11 electoral votes and potentially Maricopa County. And so that's why we've got to make sure that we have people that are going to certify these results. We're going to have an orderly election and people that are not going to just try to create disruption. So, again, I think it's important. We always say this is the most important election of our lifetime, but it's also, the most consequential because we are going down 2 different paths in this country. Which one do we want? Which one do I want my son to grow up in? Which one do I want to work and play and live in? And I do not want the MAGA agenda. I do not want that controlling our country, our state, our county, our city. I want them to have no control over what we're doing. So we've got to beat them and we've got to vote early.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is as I've gotten into the political world of understanding how voters behave and just coming out of a primary now and realizing people don't really pay attention. They were working on a campaign from May of last year until August of this year. We've realized very late in the game that really, I mentioned the bubble before. That small bubble, the LD legislative district, party offices and groups and things that they're paying attention and they're watching things all the time. But the overwhelming majority of the electorate is not watching anything until probably a month out, maybe, when all of a sudden, if you're starting to see all these ads on TV and everything, then they start kind of waking up and going, maybe I need to figure out who I want to vote for here. And so I think realizing when people are knocking on your door, when they're calling you and they want to talk to you about something, and it might seem like, oh God, I don't want to take this time and talk to this person. It's important because I think, like you said, this ballot is going to be incredibly long. And if you're not informed, that's what scares me. It's people who really aren't informed and just take the highlight.
You and I talked about this yesterday. Everybody's fatigued. It never ends anymore. There used to be a beginning and an end to campaign season, especially in this state before we were considered a battleground. But now it's just constant.
No, I mean, like coming out of 22, obviously Fontas won. And there was a little bit of a break, like December, January-ish, you know what I mean?
Yep.
But we were up and running immediately with like by February, talking to candidates, talking to things. And, and even from a candidate perspective of fundraising and what they're doing, it doesn't stop anymore. There's no like all of a sudden your emails stop.
Yeah, and you're competing for attention, you're competing for resources. I mean, it's very hard in a presidential to try and, pull people's attention and their wallets from the top of the ticket down, even though it is consequential.
Well, and even trying to get media coverage, I think that's one of the things that we've been super frustrated with it's not necessarily the reporter's fault, but our media coverage has become so based off of revenue and how much money they can make, and with the kind of prevalence of data that comes out of viewing, who's watching, who's clicking and things like that, the papers and the websites and things like that are going to lean towards stories that people care about. And if there's not really a pressing thing, they're not going to run the story, even though it's a really important story that doesn't get covered.
It's funny you said about people not paying attention. I learned, when I was chair, I thought everybody was like me, reading every article, watching news every night, living on Facebook, living on Twitter, finding out, what are people. I was so wrong, and I'm happy to admit that. I was so wrong on that, and I learned that more than ever this year, especially in a primary.
Yes. Twitter.
What happens in these LD meetings is important, but the average voter, is not. I remember during my day job, I had multiple people that were like, why isn't Joe Biden on my primary ballot? What is happening here? When am I allowed to vote? Can I not vote? Why is there an election in August?
Every cycle.
And it's just to me, it was like, okay, I've got to get out of my own bubble and realize there's an entire other world of people who you have got to tell them there's an election coming up. You're going to get your ballot on this day. You've got to vote by this day. Like I took for granted that everybody was doing that, and I was completely wrong on that.
Look, there's just people out there that just really aren't. They'll vote, they'll register, and they'll vote.
Wonderful,
but they're not watching it every day.
So I'll tell you, like in 2016, 2017, I would lose sleep at night over stuff I would see on Twitter. Like I would be a wreck. I can't believe this person said this. Oh my God. And you could ask my wife, and she'd be like, "Let it go, it's okay." And I'm like, "No, I gotta feel." And then now I see this stuff, and I'm like, okay, 8 people within the bubble are gonna see this. So again, we have to do a better job of getting our messaging out to the people who are not paying attention, the people who may not be voting, because not everybody does this full time, living and breathing. We've got to get to those people who they don't think that their vote matters. There's a lot of people who don't think that this matters, and we've got to talk to them.
Well, it's a good segue too, because I think one of the biggest challenges that we faced, I'll just speak for the Democratic Party out here, is voter registration. We talked earlier about the voter registration disadvantage. It's favored to Republicans and independents. We got so close in 2020, both in Maricopa County and statewide, to closing that gap and taking it once and for all. It's the last time we were within striking distance. And so I tell people all the time, to Ted's earlier point, Democrats can't win without independents in that moderate Republican coalition. But it comes back to the registration and the likely voters. So if you make that a priority, which is part of the getting outside of our bubble and our comfort zone and talking to individuals that don't think their vote matters, that aren't up at night thinking about Twitter, that's how you start to build that coalition stronger. And then you don't have to worry so much about pulling in different elements to win general elections.
I just think to me, the biggest challenge really in our whole society and voters and all that is this unfortunate trend of people only wanting to read news that they agree with. And so, you just like, God, how could they get away? How could they do that? And it was because if you watch certain news channels, you're only going to hear one particular narrative, and you're never going to hear the other side at all. And I think that's, I think we all have the crazy family members that are, that's what, and I say it a lot too, because I have a family member who believes all the MAGA stuff. He's in the construction business, and he's in his truck a lot. And I say this, I'm like, it's the talk radio mentality, where they spend hours and hours listening to talk radio, and all it does is reinforce their perspective of things.
Sure.
And you can't break in.
Yep.
You can't break in. They have done such a good job of completely invalidating legitimate news sources that if it doesn't agree with their thing, it's totally biased.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. And I think, back to you guys, I learned a lot from you guys about how to message things, how to talk to independents. Because before I'd only really talked to Dems. Sure. I was only talking in LD meetings. I didn't really know how to talk to independents or Republicans. So, credit to you guys, because you guys did an incredible job of messaging, the Secretary's campaign in 22 about getting out why, hey, you may have never voted for a Democrat in your life, but this is why you need to vote for this person.
Yeah, that was a special team. And I think that's why we try to work with you so often. And, we had great guys like, Sophie Wesson Bettina over at Nexus, and we had Jeannie Lunn, obviously. But it takes a team. It takes a unit of individuals with diverse backgrounds to speak to a state of individuals with diverse backgrounds and different perspectives. And I think that's the way forward for electing saner representatives, across the board.
Well, and obviously, to not beat a dead horse about Adrian, he was a phenomenal candidate.
Yep.
I mean, running for office is hard. It's hard. I mean, we talk to people, candidates that are like, God, are you sure you're up for this? Do you really understand what it's going to be? Like, even like our candidate we're handling for the sheriff's race, just talking to him. I was talking to his wife this weekend. It was like, it's hard. Are you doing okay? Like, it's because you're just going. You're going and you're trying to be everywhere you possibly can be. And Adrian did an amazing job of really traveling the state.
He did.
And he showed us, I think, and we've become a little bit of an expert on rural parts of Arizona and how important that rural vote is. You're never going to win it. Like rural America, if you look at just the map, they're the ones that are, super red, and that's why the map is what it is.
Yep.
So rural parts of the country, but there's Dems out there.
Yeah,
there's independents out there, and so I think the goal is really to try to how do you maintain that level and kind of keep them engaged so they still do come out and vote, because, like I said, you're not going to win. But you need them to vote, because otherwise that rural could overdo Maricopa County.
Yeah.
You'll lose less.
It buoys what you get in Maricopa County and Pima and places that that will decide the election.
I mean, at the end of the day, the Arizona vote count is based off the entirety of the state, not county by county. So even if you might win Maricopa huge, but rural comes out even bigger, you could lose Arizona just because.
And as far as candidates, every time I meet with a new candidate, and someone's like, oh, I talked to you about running for office, and I meet with somebody and I'm like, are you ready for this? And they're like, oh, yeah, I'm ready to go. And I'm like, no.
Is your family on board?
I'm talking like, does your wife, your husband, what son, do they know you're going to be gone 6 days a week? Like, no exaggeration. Do they really understand this?
Like, your nights are gone.
Your nights are gone.
Yeah. And you're calling friends for money.
And you're calling your friends.
Strangers for money.
And I'm like, and I'm not trying to scare them out of this.
Yeah.
But I'm also trying to be brutally honest, because I'm not going to be, I want to be honest with them, because I don't want them to come back 6 months later and be like, this is not what you told me.
Yeah.
I've almost talked people out of this before.
But I think you should. I think you should. I think we all should. I think we try to as well when we meet with new candidates that want to run. Like, we ask those questions. Are you ready?
The worst thing you can do is get in and be like, oh my God, this isn't for me. And
we hear those stories. I mean, last primary, we heard these stories of candidates that just, oh my God, did not realize how bad what this was going to be like. It is hard, and it's unfortunate. It also attracts people who, we say this a lot, politicians in general are narcissists.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you have to be. You have to be confident, and you have to be pretty self-centered to look that, I'm going to sit here and call and ask people for money that they have no idea who I am.
So shout out to all the significant others.
Absolutely.
We appreciate your sacrifice, because you are the unsung heroes.
We did that for one of our recent races. We had a spouse appreciation certificate that we passed out to all the, not just the candidate's spouse, but the spouses of the employees that worked on the campaign, because those are the unsung heroes for sure.
I mean, we do need more people to step up and run for office. We've got some great people that can do some great stuff. Unfortunately, they just need a little bit of help, a little bit of coaching to get into this. A lot of people are interested. They just don't know how to get started.
Yep. Yeah.
I will tell you, like, from myself, I had just graduated college, summer 2007. I was trying desperately to get involved. I was just randomly emailing people and nobody ever got back to me.
Yeah.
Like, I've always remembered that. A lot of the things I do now are a reflection of things that I hated when I was trying to get involved, like getting young people involved. I remember I sent emails to the Arizona Democratic Party, the Maricopa County, and like nobody was responding to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to help. Like, you don't even have to pay me. Like, I just want to help. And finally, like, somebody responded and got me involved. And like, all because she responded to an email, like I'm sitting here today.
So we're just over a month until Election Day. Why don't we wrap this up with some predictions?
Oh boy.
Good. Great. Well, since we are involved in the sheriff's race, I'm going to say that we are going to beat Jerry Sheridan and elect Tyler Camp as the next Maricopa County Sheriff, continue the legacy of Sheriff Penzone, and make sure we don't go back to the Arpaio days. So I got my plug in there.
Good call.
I think people are done with the Arpaio days. Jerry Sheridan is just Arpaio. He's not even Arpaio light. He's just another replica of Arpaio. So we've got to make sure we win that race. And Tyler is phenomenal. He's doing great work. So I'm excited for him. I think he's going to pull it off.
That's great. I totally agree. I mean, Sheridan is basically admitting he would do exactly what Arpaio did. He's talking about resurrecting Tent City.
Defying a federal judge.
He'll defy a federal judge. He'll get sanctioned again. All right, and then the big race, president.
I think Harris is going to win. I genuinely do. I think people are just past the chaos of the Trump administration. They remember the 4 years. They remember the chaos, the everyday, the mean tweets. They remember just the total incompetence at the beginning of COVID, of the mismanagement of that. I think people are ready to turn the page.
I think she wins nationally. When it comes to Arizona, we have a new law that was put in place after 2020 where there's a new recount threshold based on how close the margin is. I believe it's 0.5%. So we're just going to have to work extra hard to make sure that we stay out of that. Even though the margins are tight here, we got to get out of that so that there's no delay, there's no recount. But I'm confident. I mean, she's doing the work. The campaign's great. We just gotta get to the finish line.
Yeah, she's doing great. They've got a great team. They've got a ton of people on the ground. I think they're running a great race here locally. So I'm pretty excited for that. You know, I have not seen any ground game of Trump. I have not seen any really
other than signs
offices. Yeah. They've got some signs. They've got some stupid truck flags that
all the truck flags
they haven't learned, but that's fine. Let them do their thing.
Yeah, I agree too. I think she's going to win. I would not have said the same thing had Biden stayed in the race. You know, I think he's done an amazing job as president, but I think that just wasn't there, and I think she has re-energized the party, adding a lot of energy just to the entire race itself.
Sure.
And I agree completely. I think we all keep seeing there's this race to, like, how low can he go? How low can Trump or Vance go? And they just keep going lower and lower and lower. And it was like, and to be offending significant groups like Jews, Catholics, and women, it's like, what are you actually?
I will make a not so bold prediction that the Trump campaign will just insist that this was rigged.
Oh, we know that.
They'll file 1 million lawsuits. They'll try to drag this out. And I think after he loses, I think that's when the Republicans on their end, they'll turn the page on this whole MAGA.
I'm so hopeful that holds up and that's true.
I don't know. But I'm bracing myself for all the nuttiness after this election of what is going to happen when they lose. Because we know Kari Lake is not going to be like, congratulations, Senator Ruben Gallego. I'm happy for you.
They're already talking about it. They're already talking about
everything they're doing right now is laying the groundwork.
Just like he did in 2020. It was the same thing.
Yeah. So I am hopeful for the election. I am very worried about what is going to happen afterwards because we've had
even though it's over, it's never over.
It's never going to be over.
This erosion of confidence in our elections, in our election system, and just government in general is bad for everybody.
I mean, I think it's unfortunately, we probably should have seen this coming because the demographic shifts that was happening between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, it just wasn't looking good for the Republicans. You know what I mean? I mean, just with the cultural shifts, the ethnic shifts, things like that, and just what was happening with people being more educated. it just wasn't looking good. And so I think my perception is that literally the Republicans, saw it. And so the only way that we're going to be able to maintain power is to start basically saying these elections are rigged and they're not fair
Changing
and
the
all
rules.
that, and changing the rules so that, Well, that was a great time. Thanks for
coming in,
Steve. This was
absolutely.
great.
Happy to be here. Happy to be on the team, and anything I can do to help out.
Yeah.
Again, I appreciate all the help and the guidance you guys have given me and the entire team here. Let's go win. Let's make sure we vote
We
early.
love working with you. You're wise beyond your years. I'm so glad I met you in 2020, and I'll call you in a few minutes for some help with the races we're working on. So,
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you again so much for watching today. We are now available on all major streaming platforms, so make sure to look up Anderson Ad Break wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts.
Head to our YouTube channel.
Make sure to like and subscribe
so you don't miss out on future episodes.